Welcome everybody to week 5 of our district membership chair sessions. I appreciate you taking this hour to be with us today. This week we're going to be talking about special challenges in membership. One of those is pretty obvious, the fact that we're meeting online today, that we've turned into our own kind of e-club. The other that we're going to start with is we're going to talk about the special challenge of small clubs. I think all of you, this is not your first call, so you've met Terry Weaver a couple of times previously in our sessions. He is our assistant Rotary coordinator from the Greenville Rotary Club in South Carolina and is a data analyst and strategy specialist, and he has done a good bit of work on this topic of small clubs. So he's going to lead us off today to talk about those challenges, and then we'll move to a second speaker who I'll introduce at that time. Terry, it's all yours.
Thank you, Patrick. I'd like to share with you today some of the challenges that I think we have been less than forthright among ourselves as leaders and among club leaders that small clubs present to Rotary, but mostly to themselves. Before I start on that, though, a word about district goals. One of the things that they teach us at District Governor School is to come back to our district, formulate our goals, and then broadly distribute those goals across the district. I have a little bit different suggestion on that. My suggestion is forget it. I can't see any relevance between a district governor's or district membership chair's goals and a Rotary club. The fact is that Rotary clubs would respond a whole lot better, I believe, to goals of their own that they were committed to, rather than somehow becoming part of our plus 25 or plus 50 or whatever district membership goal we might publish. So here's an alternate approach. Considering the fact that these are autonomous clubs, they're not accountable to us, why don't we issue them instead a challenge? And here's a prototype challenge for you to consider. You can decide whether this fits your situation or not. But my suggested challenge is, if your club is over 25 members, think about the goal where you grow your club by 10 members or 10%. You take your choice. On the other hand, if your club's under 25 members, my suggestion is you think about a goal of growing to 25, or if 25 is so far away that you can't see it from there, close the gap by half between where you are and 25 members. What is the difference between these clubs above and below 25 members? I think 18 minutes from now, you'll be experts in that. Here are some membership profiles of Rotary clubs from my district. These are real clubs, and these are 5-year membership windows. Here's a club that managed its way down from 22 members to 13 members over the course of 5 years. Now, I say managed its way because these club leaders made the decisions, invoked the strategies, executed the actions necessary to reduce this club from 22 to 13 members over that 5 years. Here's another one. Now, this doesn't look bad. 17, they flirted with 20, but then 2 presidents in a row ignored membership, and they got themselves down to 13. Now, if you looked at statistics like this in nature and looked at these populations, what would you ask yourself? What does this look like? To me, this looks like an endangered species. Let me explain a little further. Here are 2 more clubs, 22 to 12, 23 to 17. Notice this pattern, and interestingly, look at the top one. That 22 to 12 would be a straight line, 2 members per year, and there's something magical about that. In all this data that I've looked at across 900 Rotary clubs, there's something magical about 2 members per year, and that is that it seems to be within the threshold of pain. Most Rotary clubs can just shake off a 2-member-a-year loss, excuse themselves for it, and then, of course, next year it's lather, rinse, repeat, and it's down 2 more members. That's how you get from 22 to 12 over 5 years. Chances are this club was at 32 the 5 years before. Here's another one, 23 to 15. You're starting to notice a pattern here. What do you suppose the next 5 years looks like after this? Here's what that looks like. It looks like lights out. And my district has dropped, on average, 1 Rotary club every other year for as long back as I've got data. And in fact, we broke that streak for about 3 years running, And then it caught up with us in the past 24 months. We've dropped 3 Rotary clubs, and every single one of them went down exactly the same glide path, and almost all of them at about the same rate. It's just almost frightening. Now, when we're talking with small clubs about this, don't give them the impression that we're picking on them. Don't give them the impression that we don't appreciate them. It's not true that small clubs can't serve their communities. They do. It's not true that they can't support the Rotary Foundation. They do, and most of them, because of the smaller denominator, they have exemplary per capita giving records to the Rotary Foundation. The problem is loss of sustainability, loss of critical mass. And here's how that goes. You slip below a critical mass of about 20 members, which, as you know, is today's threshold for chartering a club. There's a reason for that. You drift down to 18 to 16 to 14, usually over about 3 years. It's so slow, people don't even realize what's happening. They come into a meeting and look around, and there's a chair empty that was filled 6 months ago. Oh, well, yeah, another one bites the dust. Then you start having meetings of 10 or 12 members, and you start trying to attract speakers to speak to a group that size. And most of them say, you know, I don't know if I want to take the time. Then you have trouble attracting new members. Somebody comes and visits your club, looks around at this assemblage of 8 or 10 or 12 people, and says, I thought this was Rotary International. What is this about? Where's everybody else? You also have trouble executing meaningful projects. The 80-20 rule applies. Whether you're at 16 members or 160, it'll still be about 20% of the people that show up and actually help out. The other thing that is interesting about most of these clubs is that they have few members under 50, and many of them are just aging out together. It's just a slow walk up the median age curve at literally 1 year per year, median age. Now, at 10 or 12 members, something interesting happens. At 10 or 12 members, a Rotary Club goes nuclear. And by that, I mean you get down to 1 proton and 1 neutron holding this thing together. And at that point, the next thing happens, which is life happens to one of those, and it's lights out. Now, in each of these clubs that we've watched fail in this district over the last dozen or so years, I could tell you the name in advance of the person that something was going to happen to, and the club would fold. The most recent one was a couple. It was a couple holding the club together, and they're down to 12, 14, something like that. They decided to move closer to their kids, left the club. It wasn't 60 days until that club was on its back. Now, I noticed this in 2014-15 before I became governor, and here's the data. Of the 10 clubs in my district with the largest percentage membership loss in 2014-15, 9 were under 25 members, and those 9 clubs alone accounted for a net loss of 30 members. Is this frightening or what? We started paying attention to this. In fact, that's what this original material was created for in 2015. 2015-16, the 16 clubs under 25 members had a net gain of 18 members. This can be fixed, but it takes focus and it takes clarity. It doesn't have to be this way, folks. Here's a club that got itself down to 22 members. A new sheriff came to town, in this case, a business owner, looked at this and said, guys, this is not sustainable. We can't stay on this track. He grew that club about 30% in that 1 year by about 10 members from 22 to 32, then stayed on as membership chair for the year following his presidency and continued to propel that club northward. And that's important because when you add a lot of members, like say 10, what you realize is that you're right in the target zone of our highest attrition rate, which is members with 1, 2, or 3 years tenure. But here's another club where they took a surge like that actually on the basis of a challenge. I challenged the president-elect when we met at PETS. I said, Charles, couldn't we get this club back to 40 members like it used to be? And he said, well, I suppose so. And then about 9 months later into the year, I said, Charles, where did you find all these people that wanted to join your Rotary Club? He said, we asked them. So they grew that club up to a pinnacle of 43 members, and then the lack of a sustained ongoing membership effort, they lost some ground to 39, but still a whole lot different story than 28 5 years before. Now here's one. This one doesn't look all that interesting, unless you know the backstory. The backstory is that this club recovered from 14 members. This is a club that my own club chartered. We chartered them, we turned around, we walked away. They lost their charter president literally in their charter year. Someone else had to step in, not prepared, of course. And this club atrophied down to 14 members. It chartered at 25. Back then, that was the threshold. And one courageous president, she was one of the charter members, she went around the year she was president-elect, and she sat down in front of every member, and she said, "Are you with me or not?" And those that opted in put this club back together, assisted by another charter member who followed her, now is a past district governor. And the two of them together put this club back together, got it up into critical mass, then started growing it on the basis of a large, iconic project that they've been doing now for the last 15 years. And today, this club is 41 members. You can get from 14 to 41. It takes intentionality, and it takes throwing off this small club mentality. Now, this club, during this time, their tagline was the little club that does, the little club that does. And I started kidding them after this started happening. I said, y'all are going to have to change this to the little club that got big. They can hardly call themselves a little club anymore. Here's a club. The president-elect heard exactly this message in January of 2015 when their club was at 13 members. Said to himself, Terry, you might be right about that. Went back home. They actually invited me down at the southwest part of the state. They invited me down to do this as a program. And in the course of about 2 years, had themselves up to a critical mass of 23 members, and they're now within striking range of 30. Here's another club, same story, managed their way down to 22 and then later to 24. Heard the same message, same date time frame. It was actually worse than this because once upon a time, only 8 years before, they were at 40 members. And they recovered their way back to somewhere north of 30 and then settled out at 30 in the course of about 3 years. This can be fixed. So what we're trying to build here then is not a membership drive, not a membership campaign. We're trying to build a culture of membership growth where people understand that an effective Rotary Club maintains or grows its membership moderately on a regular basis. A membership growth strategy is what leads to a growth culture. You can't move culture all by itself. You have to first move behaviors, strategies, and actions, and then the culture will come along once those are successful. I can assure you that absent a growth culture, your Rotary Club will shrink. Now, when I'm not doing this, what I do part-time, my encore career, is small business coaching. And you'd be amazed at how similar a 20-person small business and a 20-person Rotary Club are, especially those that are failing. And typically what happens when a small business is failing, they have a shortage of prospects, they have a shortage of selling systems, and they have lost a growth culture and they start shrinking. That's because Newton was right. Newton was right about at least two things. One of them friction, the other one gravity. Those are the two forces that will pull your Rotary Club down if you're not applying some energy and if you don't have a growth strategy and a growth culture. I want you to think about this analogy and perhaps use it. It's there for the taking. A hot air balloon cannot be flown level. Physically impossible to do. There are no control surfaces, no avionics. The only control you've got is a chain attached to a propane valve that shoots hot flaming propane up into the bag. At that point, the balloon will start to rise until it starts cooling off, and then it will start to shrink. It's just steadily either rising or shrinking, one or the other. It's not flying level. Now, the default, of course, is descent. And in the balloon business, that's known as premature contact with terrain, not where you want to be. The other part of this analogy that works is that it requires the addition of energy. It requires the addition of energy to make a Rotary Club grow or to make a small business grow. They will not do it on their own. Now, in case you weren't convinced by the individual case studies I showed you before, here's one to consider. This is a case study about a district. And this is a district that I was doing a new set of MGI reports, Membership Growth Index reports. I went to RI to get the data, asked for 5 years. Nora gave me 15 years of data. That goes back to 2004. That's as far as their systems reach. 2004. So the data you're going to see is from 2004 to 2019. This district had 31 club failures in that 15-year window. It just took my breath away. I looked at this number and I said, I got to look at this a little bit more. I have to understand what the glide path looked like for all 31 of those clubs to fail in a 15-year window. Folks, here's what those glide paths look like. Notice from 20, a 2-member-a-year glide path. Notice how incredibly tightly these clubs clustered around that glide path. Even if you start from a higher altitude, say from 30 clubs on a 2-member-a-year glide path, it just takes a little longer, but you get the same place. Notice almost none of these clubs ever actually broke out. A couple of them had 1 or 2 years where they grew by a few members, but the dominant mode was a culture of decline that set in on these clubs, and over this 15-year period, they failed. Okay, well, maybe we got that behind us, or maybe we don't. The same district has 22 clubs remaining that are under 15 members. This is like watching a train wreck in slow motion. Here's what those look like. You'll notice the water line at 15, and you'll notice that in 2019, all of them were below water, and you'll notice how they got there. Now, here's what the 2-member-a-year decline looks like, and the fact is they weren't actually, this group of 15, all declining at quite that rate. It was really actually more like a 1 member per year bleed from, say, 20 down to 5 over the course of that time period. Notice also that only a handful of them actually started this journey at under 15 members, and almost all of them are smaller today than that. Most of these clubs, one from looks like something on the order of 34 members, figured out a way in only 15 years to unravel a 34-member club and get it down below 15 members. Only a matter of time until that club is gone, along with these other 22, unless we are willing to engage and see if we can help these clubs. So here's some ideas. If you're willing to take this message into a smaller club, probably to the board, here's some questions you want to arm yourself with. Have them ask themselves, do you ever think about, why is my 16-member club only 16 members? Why is that? Is that in the bylaws somewhere? Why is it we can add 1 or 2 members a year to almost maintain 16? We can't add 3 or 4. It's not like we don't know how to attract members at all. We just don't set our sights high enough, and we just don't do it often enough. Could we, in fact, just be victims of a small club mindset? Have we just convinced ourselves that we're small and convinced ourselves that we like it that way, not recognizing the potential pitfalls of this small club mentality? At 14 or 16, it only takes a couple of casualties to get you on that downhill glide path towards premature contact with terrain. What can we do in our community if we had 32 members? It's inarguable that a 32-member Rotary Club couldn't be more effective in its community than a 16-member Rotary Club. And it's also, my observation, a whole lot easier to run a 32-member Rotary Club than a 16-member Rotary Club. First of all, nobody has to worry about being president for the 3rd time. You've got a steady flow of new members, you got a steady flow of new potential leadership, and over time you build yourself a bench. So should we just rethink our membership mindset? Should we start thinking about ourselves as 32 rather than 16? Rotary opens opportunities, and the opportunities for you, I think, as district membership chairs, as DGEs and some DGNs on the line, is to take seriously these challenges of small clubs with whom I don't think we've been forthright. We're so concerned over offending people that we're not willing to help them. Again, we're not picking on anybody here. We're not saying that small clubs can't effectively serve their communities. We're not saying that small clubs can't effectively support the Rotary Foundation. We are saying simply, we are seriously frightened for their future. Be happy to take questions.
We have time built in for questions, so please fire away.
I have one, Terry. How about the club that says to you, we're a very small community, we've got 4,000 population, how do you expect us to get that many members?
Well, I guess I would say it's kind of a mystery to me how it is that you're able to attract 1 or 2 members, but you can't attract 3 or 4. I mean, is there some boundary to how many people could be interested in Rotary in a year? I mean, it doesn't stand to reason that we can find anybody to join our club and we can't find more of them. It's simply a small club mindset. And of course, the community size provides a convenient excuse, if you'll buy it. I have in my county 11 Rotary clubs. Someone told me one time, well, that's the problem. We can't grow Rotary clubs in Greenville County because there's too many of them. And I looked at the guy and I said, hey, what's the name of the last person your club was hard after and some other club picked your pocket? That's a vapor argument.
Irvin, you had a question?
Yes. So you're telling us to scrap our numerical goals. I have a numerical goal. Tomorrow, I have district training assembly with president-elects. So I have to go in there and tell them I'm going to scrap this goal and create another one for each club to create a culture that grows Rotarians or grow Rotary. Or I'll clean it up a little better.
Well, first, I'm not telling you to do anything. What I'm suggesting is that when you put a big umbrella goal over dozens of business units, your club, your district has somewhere between 40 and 80 clubs in it, if you're in this zone. And I don't know what a club is supposed to do with my district membership goal. You know, I wanted to grow plus 50. That was my idea as a district governor. But I didn't tell them that because I knew that they weren't going to shoulder up for their 1/50th of that. What I realized was that they needed to have their own goals that were important to them and that they were committed to. So I'm not telling you anything. I'm suggesting that you think about suggesting that they build their own goals.
This is Jack from 7280. So should that not be part of the training of new presidents and new membership chairs, that we teach that process so that those things continue to move forward? I have clubs in our district that don't even have membership chairs. It's difficult.
Well, to be direct with you, this idea has been the cornerstone of any zone-supported district membership summits that we've helped districts with. We're available.
I'll take you up on it. Thank you.
I'm going to cut this section right here because the next section is going to be a facilitated discussion, so there'll be more opportunities for your input, your questions, and your comments. Terry, thank you very much. I think you all can see why Terry is going to be entering his 5th year as an assistant Rotary coordinator, the kind of value he brings to understanding the data and being able to boil down the numbers into a way that we can get really useful information. So Terry, thank you for that presentation. I'm now going to introduce Scott Bayline, who will be our newest member of the Rotary coordinator team. Scott lives in Port Allegheny, Pennsylvania, in District 7280, and is a member of the Port Allegheny Rotary Club. And he'll be serving District 7280, 7305, and 7360. And he's going to facilitate a discussion now, kind of following up on the information that Terry just presented. Scott, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Patrick. Jack from 7280, you were a nice lead-in, man. You guided us into this section. So we all know we have clubs that are small and may feel that they are great clubs in their community. They do a lot of good things in the community, and they may do a lot of other good things as far as we look at other measurements as far as in Rotary. But what we really want to do is try to encourage them to take ownership of a membership growth plan, to make them aware of the type of statistics that Terry just showed us, that if you aren't growing, you are declining. So I have some thought starters here, and my objective is really basically to get you to discuss this and share information amongst yourself. And I can certainly facilitate that and add as need be. But between Patrick and I, we'll try to keep an eye on who's looking to speak and not walk on each other. But my first question to you is, as you kind of picked up there, Irv, that we have a membership goal at the district level, and the clubs aren't going to necessarily embrace that. So how do we get them to recognize they have an issue and change their membership culture so that they take ownership of this? Anybody have anything they want to share, or go ahead?
I'll add something as a DGE that I was thinking about this, and I think over the next month and a half, and certainly next several months, it behooves me to have individual conversations with probably 10 or 15 president-elects that have the most potential for growth, and maybe the ones that have the most concerns about continuing to slide. There's probably 15 or 20 clubs that I could have the highest impact on, and for me to focus on those.
Excellent, thank you. Anybody else have anything to add?
God, this is Jack. I think, in 2 years, I'm going to get my opportunity to be a district governor. And I look forward to that because I think I want to build some competition between our clubs. But in doing that, I need to make sure that they're prepared to answer that challenge. And so from this point, as a membership chair, I've got to be able to engage all the membership directors from each of the clubs and get them motivated to their plan and get them busy. It's difficult when I look on RI and I look at there's a lot of clubs don't even have it listed who they are. And, it's difficult. So I know that's a lot of work, but that's okay, because that'll pay off tenfold if we get them going.
Thanks. Yeah, it kind of leads you into what are the district resources, and does your district have, not necessarily 7280, but anybody, does your district have the resources to support clubs who want to grow their membership?
Stan, go ahead.
Dan, this is my second year as DCM, coming off being a district governor the year before that, and I've been going to the Terry Weaver show for about 5 years now, and it's starting to sink in that it is really down to basics, that the plan is there, that you can't force a club to grow. You can destroy a club, but you can't make it grow. All you can do is provide some fertilizer, follow the steps that have been given us, and get the clubs to adopt those. I've finally gotten one good example in my district of a small club that finally started having an annual Rotary hour, and they've gained, the first year they did it, they gained 9 members and got into their 20s from the teens. And this year they gained 5 members. So they've doubled the size of their club in 2 years. So they're not a small club anymore. They're almost 30 members now. It's really basics, and it has to be done at the club level. And as a district, you can go in and hold their hand, but they have to be willing to do it. They have to, it's the energy required, as Terry said. They have to have some energy. You can't force it from the outside. We have one club in our district that's at 7 members, and we have been babysitting that club for the 7 years I've been in the district. It has more attention than any other club, and they've managed themselves down from about 20 down to 6 or 7 now. I think it's 7 now. And they're just dying one by one, just as Terry said. You got to get back to basics and do it with them. They have to do it.
Linda, Terry has a wonderful program for his club called Discovery Rotary, where they an hour before they had their meeting, they have members invite people to come that might be potential members, and they do a kind of a roundtable Discovery Rotary program. And you might want to start an email dialogue with Terry to get some of especially get the slide chart deck that he has that they use for their club. And you can populate those clubs that are not doing well and said, here's a technique. You can have before you meet, don't have them come to the club meeting per se, have them come to a Discover Rotary program right before the meeting. And so it's been an effective tool in our district for a lot of clubs called Discovery Rotary. And
sounds like something that we are planning on doing. We are going to have a membership summit and enjoy that opportunity. I have one other question to ask. Some discussions have been made about these clubs that are under 10, asking them to merge with others. Has anybody had a positive outcome with that thought?
I'll be happy to field that question. And I want to also address the earlier one. First, if you have 2 clubs of 10 members that can't figure out how to find more Rotarians, and you put them together, my assessment is you've basically got 1 club of 10 members when you're all done. I don't see combining weakness to produce strength. But this whole line of conversation reminds me of the old joke, how many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is only 1, but the light bulb must want to change. So the point is that the only way I've seen this work, I've done it myself. I visited 5 of these small clubs by invitation during my year as governor. I got life-saving merit badges out of 3 of them. Now, 2 of them it didn't take. 1 eventually merged, thankfully, with a stronger club, with a strong club, not another weak club. And 1 of them failed. But 3 of them listened up, and what I did was I did essentially the same overview, the wake-up call, I call it, the wake-up call presentation that I gave you here. I am just genuinely frightened for your future. And my question is to you, in the one case, one of these clubs had gotten themselves down to about 14 members, one of the ones that was on the slides, and they had for years, 25 years, hosted a huge football tournament in the county. It was called the Rotary Bowl, and they sold out like a 26-page program of ads, raised a bunch of money, and everybody looked forward to the Rotary Bowl every year. It became an iconic community event. And I finished my presentation and conversation. I looked around at the 8 or 10 people that were there. I said, are you all willing to give up the Rotary Bowl? And they just looked at each other like it had never occurred to them that they couldn't continue doing that project at 8 members. And it was just basically that rattling their cage, sort of jostling them out of that complacency that, yeah, we used to be 30, then we were 24, then we're 16, now we're 14, we're just fine. You're not just fine. You're slowly bleeding to death. We start with a tourniquet, then we start with some muscle building exercises.
Pat, did you have something you wanted to add? There you go.
I was going to say that there's a couple of things. One is, why did this happen? You really have to kind of get in and appreciate the dynamics that got them there. And I found that in some of these clubs that have continued to have a downward trajectory, in one, I mean, there is an outright bully in the club. And that individual keeps thinking they're going to be the club of the past, has no interest in changing. And when we have these discussions, is very overt with his comments and cuts the other members off, and it's very sad. I think the second thing to your question earlier, encouraging clubs to open their mind to thinking about becoming a satellite club of another larger functioning club. And that isn't the death of their club. It actually is an opportunity for them to take a breather, learn, and they can actually start to redevelop. And once they've kind of got a grasp back on the club, they can spin out and go back and either be themselves or be another club. So becoming a satellite of a more successful club does not mean that your club is going to die. And my last comment was, Terry, your comment on helping smaller clubs understand it is they are losing their ability to sustain themselves. And I think that is a more successful conversation. Certainly it is when you're being a consultant to businesses, and I totally agree. I mean, we have to approach clubs, I think, more as business, on business context, and somehow their eyes open up and they're like, oh yeah, I guess that applies to a service club too. But thank you.
Thank you.
I've closed that conversation on occasion with, are y'all willing to be the last generation of Rotarians in your town?
Exactly.
Because that's where it's headed. You keep doing what you're doing, you're on that path.
Yep. Let me encourage everybody on the, one of the things in District 7690 that we did for the last 4 years, we've had Terry and the district, or the zone team, excuse me, membership team come in and present a membership summit. It has taken many of our clubs at least 4 years to, quote, the light bulb comes on. That, oh, we do have a problem, and Terry and his team has come in and done such an excellent job. This year, we've had the success that, and I give all the credit to Terry and Patrick and the team that came in, and Patrick that was before me. But we finally have seen clubs with the light bulb go on, say, yeah, we still are struggling with those very small clubs, and some of them are just in complete denial. I've been to every one of them. Claudia's been to them as in her role as assistant, and other things too. But there is a time where at some point the light bulb must come on, but information in most cases is the critical element to getting the light bulb to come on, for them to see that, oh, we are about to go out of business. And for some, for others, they're still, the light bulb's not on. They don't get it. They're always, we're going to hope, and hope is definitely not a strategy to growth. So I just encourage you, take advantage of the opportunity of this great leadership team from the zone area that will come in and hopefully give your folks in a local area the idea of, okay, here's the plan, here's the pattern, here's the opportunity, and build on that. So I just encourage you strongly that's part of our success this year, is the fact that finally the light bulb for a number of them has come on and they're starting to see. That doesn't mean we've had one this year that was a regular club is now a satellite club. They saw that we've tried this for 7, 8, 10 years. Since I was governor, it hasn't worked. We can't get over 13, and we don't know why. So they're now a satellite club. We're seeing that as a natural opportunity, rather for failure, for success to grow, as Pat just shared. And so this is the thing that I would encourage you to think about. Get these folks, get them in there, do that membership summit, and it will change the dynamic, but it won't happen in 1 year. I caution you, This is a multi-year effort, and expect that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Charles, I'd like to add to that. Y'all, Charles and I are in the same district. I believe that in the situation where the light bulb went on for one club that I'm thinking about in particular, the light bulb went on, and then it became a club activity where the entire club realized where it was and that they were on the downward path and needed to turn around. And that club did turn around. But what we have learned also is that this is not a one-person job. When you've got an ambitious club president who really focuses on membership, it can be a nice bump for that year. But unless the entire club or a good portion of the club is behind that movement, then that growth doesn't sustain itself. So it's not a one-person job. It has to be the club culture of growth that Terry is talking about, and to have the buy-in and the enthusiasm and the support of the club to go in the same direction.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I just, I can only speak for my district. We have a large number of what you define as small clubs, clubs under 20 members. And I think, I think we have a couple of problems. Number one, in the past couple of years, I'm not sure that growth of membership has been as high a priority as it needs to be. I think a lot of the smaller clubs really haven't had this type of discussion that, you are on a glide path to extinction. You really can't continue to sustain it like this. You contribute to the community, you contribute to the foundation, you have, events that you've probably held for the last 25 years, and you've got the same people doing those events, and you are a great asset to your community. But as you continue to get smaller over the years, at some point, you're no longer going to be an asset to the community. You've got to grow. There's always the possibility of maybe a merger, because we have a number of clubs that are geographically very close. They are within a stone's throw of one another that are smaller. We've already had 2 clubs merge into one club so far this year, and that club is now 37 members as opposed to 25 and 12. But I think, we face a couple of challenges. Number one, I don't believe the small clubs have had this discussion with leadership, which I think they need to have. I think there will be some clubs that will say, we're perfectly happy the way we are. We really don't want to change. I think, in my opinion, we say to them, if that's your philosophy, you're autonomous. You can do what you want. We're here to help you. We're here to support you in any way we possibly can. But we're going to move on to the clubs that want our help, that want our support, that want something. I think the other thing is, for so many years that I've been in Rotary, we've talked about membership growth and how you grow Rotary, and there's never been a real intentional strategy that the district or the zone has been able to give to clubs to say, this is the way you can grow membership. We have had many times a district governor or membership chairs that have talked to district leaders, to club leaders, and the enthusiasm is high when that happens. And then without a definitive and intentional strategy that they can implement easily, that enthusiasm wanes, and the next thing you know, you're back to where you were, or even worse. So I do think it's incumbent upon us as district leaders and zone leaders to be able to give that to the clubs. Now it's their responsibility to pick that up and run with it, but it's got to be something that's intentional, something that's written, and something that they can use and easily implement. I know that I've talked to Patrick a couple of times about the Discover Rotary program. That's something that's going to be at the very top of our membership strategy moving forward this year. So That's just my opinion, and I can only speak for my district.
Thanks, Al. Yeah, a couple things, I picked up out of that is, it's a strategy. You're absolutely correct there. So how do we get the clubs to embrace that strategy? And then, kind of the second piece of that is, and you may not be prepared to answer that, but it's something we can talk about next week with your individual groups. Do we have the resources, and how do we implement a strategy for those clubs who want to help? Any thoughts? Anybody else wants to share?
Yes.
There you go.
Okay. I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit, because I had two situations in our district. Now 75-45 was 75-30 last year when this happened. I did a membership seminar last January. Two clubs walked away from that and did amazing things. One was a very weak club, old club, traditional club, little mountain town, had been going downhill, probably 2 per year for years. They were in trouble. Another was a very strong club. Here's the key that I saw. They didn't follow any directives in terms of you should go do this. They came to that seminar, they listened to other clubs speak who had done innovative things. They walked out, they created what worked for them. But here is the key, and here is what I have been pushing ever since. Both of those clubs came to the seminar in multiples. Both of those clubs typically go in multiples. They try to get their leadership team there. I see a huge difference when that happens, rather than sending the membership chair, who goes back, typically doesn't have a lot of power in the club and loses their energy because nobody's really on board. These clubs come with the leadership team, including the membership chair, and they leave with a lot of ideas, a lot of energy, and a lot of enthusiasm. The club that was dying, they both took 9 months to make a major change after that. The club that was dying totally reinvented themselves, totally. They went from meeting every week in a kind of an old sort of restaurant that wasn't very, it was just kind of drab, to meeting in the bar, which does lend itself to a meeting, at the public country club once a month, and doing all kinds of projects other than that. And I went to their induction meeting. They have 11 new members, and that was in September, and they have maintained them. They 12 new members, I'm sorry. They went from 19 to 31. The other team, the other club, which was strong, decided that they could form an alternate time meeting. They do not want a satellite club. They don't want them to leave them. Their alternate time meeting or club has 11 members. And I forget the number. They went from 38 members to, 39 members to 50 members. And they have maintained that. But they didn't follow anybody's pattern. They listened, they got excited. They figured out what might work for them. They tested some things, and some things didn't work, and then they backed up and they did it again. But they've both been hugely successful. They have changed the nature of their clubs, especially the one that was failing, and their success continues. So I think sometimes, it's up to those people in the clubs who certainly have the ability to do this. They need to come up with what works for them. But here's what they both learned, I think, first and foremost at that meeting, was that they had the opportunity to do that Rotary is giving them the flexibility, and not much was off the table. So they've both been very successful. Now I'll try to get my speaker back.
Thank you. All right. I think we got a little bit more time, Patrick. Okay. Anybody else have anything else they want to add, or questions that they want to share?
Yes, I do. Hi, my name's Pat Campbell White. I know you can only see my picture because I'd have to hook my cell phone up to get me live, but so you've got the stationary thing, and I'm not fighting sound problems. I've sat here for 4 or 5 weeks and been very, very quiet, and I can't tell you how massively impressed and thankful I am. This is my first foray into leadership at the district level,
And Rebecca, that was absolutely fantastic. And I take away from, I'm not going to have all these ideas. I'm just going to get the people in the room and let them formulate their own ideas and make sure that we give them all the tools that we can and support them in every way that we can. And that's just my takeaway, and how grateful I am for the last 4 or 5 weeks of sitting here. This is I usually do the Tuesday meetings, but I was giving blood this week. So this is my first chance of seeing many of you here on a Thursday meeting. So I just needed to jump in and say thank you all so very much.
I'm glad we're providing the tools that you need. That's great. Anybody else?
If I may, I just want to piggyback on that. I mean, I think at the district level, our job is just to let everybody know about the tools and resources that we have. And Patrick and your team have been great on doing it and keeping everybody informed. The stuff is out there. It's for us to deliver to them, but I think the clubs need to take ownership. And I think it's great, Rebecca. I've seen it too when you have multiple people from a club at 10. They're more engaged and they're able to share that message. All we can keep doing is putting it in front of them and sharing. And what may work for one club or one district may not work for the other, but we can share the stories and share the tools. Ultimately, it comes down to them being honest, reflecting on their community and their club, and if they're having the biggest impact, and just keep people engaged. They engage, they show the community, and I think PR is going to have a big piece. But if they do that, the club will grow by itself. I mean, people get attracted. I haven't asked anybody to join. They come, they visit, they're asking to sign up. I'm like, you need to come a few more times to really understand on what we're doing, because they see the value that's there and they see what we're doing in the communities. And I think that's probably one of the best ways to prosper. But yeah, I mean, Patrick, thank you again for the tools. I mean, you want analytics? Terry has plenty of analytics if you want to get down to the numbers. So the tools are there. We just share them and help guide them.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, just to kind of wrap up here, I just want to play back some of the things I heard just to make sure everybody kind of remembers those things. But, the bottom line here is that it's a long-term strategy, and clubs need to help themselves. We can't force them. And you have the flexibility. We started off talking a lot about satellite clubs, and that may work in some areas, and it's not going to work in other areas. There's definitely variations to our clubs in our districts, and what will work in one area may not work in another area. But the message to the club is, hey, what do you need? What do you want to do? And you're free to do it. And encourage them to try new things. The one other thing that I kind of heard there is that, clubs may not want to change, feel they're fine the way they are, and we can't fix that. But I always like to say to them, I steal this from Jeff Catterat, who says, we're going to miss you. and that's a great line when you say that. I would say, well, we're going to miss you. And they react to it differently than they would if you tell them you got to fix your problems. You just say, well, we're going to miss you. Kind of thing. But anyway, I appreciate the dialogue and the discussion. So it was great, and certainly talk with your groups next week and let us help you. Patrick's available, your ARC is available, and that's what we're here for, to try to help you deliver that message in whatever way works to your club. So with that, I'll turn it back to Patrick.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for facilitating that, and thank you for that very nice summary. There's a lot to be learned in peer-to-peer sharing like this. We certainly, as an RC team, don't claim to have all the answers. We have a lot of resources that we try to bring forward, but this theme is correct. It is up to clubs to make changes. It's up to us to support and encourage. And I appreciate you all supporting and encouraging each other with what you just shared. So I'm going to shift to talking about Rotary in a COVID and a post-COVID world. All right, so you may have noticed that things have changed a little bit. Lately, we all have turned into e-clubs, it seems. And even this training, which I've been going to some form of this training, this and Rotary Foundation for about 15 years at a zone level. And here we are online getting together each week for an hour. Dramatic changes. We have to deal with forced separation, and even when we get back together, a certain amount of social distancing, depending on where you are within our zone. To give you an idea of Rotary's stance on this COVID world that we're in, some of you are aware, but some of you probably are not aware that the Rotary International Board will not get together in person again during 2020. Committees for Rotary International will not get together in person again during 2020. So that is already off the table for the next 7.5 months. President's representatives who typically come to district conferences, there will not be any sent out to district conferences in 2020-21. So that's already out to June of 21. Of course, our convention, where many of us would have been in Hawaii in a couple of weeks, as well as our Zone Leadership Summit in November, are both going to be held virtually. So this is very serious stuff, and Rotary is looking very far out. Some of you know I'm a big golfer and involved with the golf fellowships. We've already canceled our October National Championship in Niagara Falls, and next May's International Championship, which was to be in North Carolina, has been canceled. So lots of changes underway. Support of your clubs, and this applies to all of us on this call, no matter what current position we're serving in. Your clubs need you. There are plenty of president-elects who have a tough time preparing to run a club in normal circumstances. I have heard from many presidents-elect who are just completely beside themselves, not sure what to do. This is one of those cases where, as district leaders, we have to get involved. We have to reach out to clubs. We have to show them the way. I've been very pleased with our Rotary International directors who immediately when this started holding zone Zoom meetings twice a week, and they set a very, very good example for districts. As district leaders, we have to do the same thing. I know that there are plenty of districts that are holding weekly or semi-weekly, bi-weekly calls, Zoom calls, and that's great. That sets a super example for clubs. Many clubs have made the transition into meeting virtually and are having no trouble at all with that. Some clubs are having even better attendance than normal, but there's some clubs that aren't meeting at all. And that causes me great concern. It should cause you concern as well in terms of losing that engagement that I know Nico touched on and others touched on that is so critical to the membership piece. So if we do this right, we can make our club meetings online the best hour of the week. But that takes some work, and I think for most clubs, it's going to take some assistance from the district. So I encourage you to assemble some of your best tech people and to reach out to clubs, and for the ones who need help, who will accept help, to offer them technical assistance. I think it's going to be very important. Most districts have actually saved some expense money, either by not holding a district conference, not holding a district training assembly in person. Maybe their officer installation is going to be done virtually. So a lot of districts have some extra funds. Some have made those available to clubs to help them with their projects. And a lot of clubs are still doing projects, a lot of it being food drive or things they can do online. But districts are supplying money to help amplify what the clubs are doing. I know of at least one district that purchased Zoom licenses for each area in its district to put it right there for the clubs to use. So that's another way that the funds can be redeployed. But it's critical to reach out to clubs and to give them all of the assistance, and in this case, really sort of guide them along. Most of you are aware that Stephanie Yurchik, our Rotary International Director, before she came onto the board, led Rotary's revamping of the strategic plan, something that I'm really proud that our now director was so involved with, And I really like the 4 very succinct strategic priorities and objectives that come out of that strategic plan. And I think that they, excuse me, they apply to what we're doing now in this COVID world. Increase our impact. Now, at first, that may seem like something that's pretty hard to do when most of us are not able to get together physically, but we can continue to support big projects like polio, and most of us have anti-hunger efforts underway to support that. The anti-hunger efforts are even more needed now in our communities. But coming out of this pandemic, there are going to be new priorities for communities that were not there before, or perhaps lesser priorities that are going to become bigger priorities. Taking the time to assess what your community needs is going to be important, and addressing that is going to be a way of increasing our impact. Expanding our reach. And what this really talks about is our reach as a Rotary organization into places where we've not had good reach. So creating new avenues into Rotary, certainly taking advantage of social media to be able to create new channels of information flowing out, as well as reach to those who might have an interest in helping their community. And I mentioned that we are stretching new muscles right now through the new ways that we are functioning in Rotary. And I believe that's going to increase our appeal. There are clubs out there who are still bringing in members. Some of them are bringing in members who have not physically attended a meeting, an in-person meeting yet, who have joined or have attended 3 or 4 meetings online and then joined a club. So that can still occur. And I think, in the case of the new muscles being our ability to meet online, I think that's going to be important as we go forward, because even when we're allowed to meet in person, some are going to be hesitant to do so. There's going to probably be a need for some type of hybrid operation for in-person and virtual meetings. Enhance participant engagement, the 3rd priority. The needs of our members, the needs of our community are going to change, and re-examining what our members need and having that drive the way we operate our clubs is going to be essential. The world has changed, and it likely is not going to return to what it was 6 months ago. So it's going to be critical that we re-examine what our members need and what our prospective members need, those people who are not yet members of our club. We can continue to provide leadership development online, and certainly the social and professional connections we can continue to have online. There are plenty of clubs that are getting together for cocktail parties, even full areas of multiple clubs that get together, an evening of the week at 5 o'clock. They share a beverage, they swap stories, and that type of thing is continuing to go on. For those who we are not reaching through virtual cocktail parties or through our virtual meetings, it is very important to reach out to them. I know of club presidents who have gone out to visit every member of their clubs. They're obviously not going into their homes, but they are ringing the doorbell. They're standing 10 feet away, and they're chatting for 10 or 20 minutes just so that member does not drift away and become a former Rotarian. Increasing our ability to adapt. Well, we're certainly putting that to the test right now. This whole series we're doing, obviously we had to adapt. We had planned out a 24-hour May 1st, May 2nd district membership chair training event and have moved it online, obviously. Clubs and districts are doing that as well. We're showing that we can adapt, and I think that's an attractive quality for our clubs. But as I mentioned before, I do think that as we move back into in-person meetings, there's going to be a need for some of our members to have virtual access to our meetings, and I think that's going to be important for us to develop. So wrapping up, I said in the very first week when we got together, communication is an essential part of leadership. It absolutely is, and it's necessary now more than ever. So as district leaders, communicate with your clubs, find out how they're doing, find out what their needs are, find out how you can support them, attempt to guide them so that they're able to maintain their memberships. Member attraction and Discover Rotary Hours can still continue. There are clubs holding those online and they are still attracting members. That does not need to stop. And the last thing I want to say, and I think this is really important, we will be remembered for the way we responded during this crisis. Our current members are going to remember, our communities are going to remember. We have to give our very best response as we work through the current COVID and as we move into a little bit more of a normalcy type of situation. So we have a little bit of time for questions and answers. I'd be happy to take your comments, your questions. The answers may come from among this group rather than me, probably so. But we're in a strange time, and I would love to hear your ideas or your questions.
Hi, Patrick. This is Geeta again. I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts about this new initiative to network with Toastmasters International? How do you think that's going, and do you have any experience with that?
Well, Geeta, as you know, it's just being rolled out. I'm optimistic that that's going to be a value add for Rotarians. I do think many Rotarians, whether they join for this reason or not, part of their value equation is to develop as leaders. And certainly the ability to communicate, the ability to speak with confidence is part of that. It's hard for me to predict how well it's going to go. I do have a saved email that I got about 2 weeks ago that sort of has some first resources available. And I'm planning to spend some time with that this weekend and to check that out and see how that looks. But I'm hopeful and optimistic that it's going to be a productive partnership.
Can I add as well, Patrick?
Of course.
The major thing as well with Toastmasters is also from the surveys that has been done from RI, where younger professionals or younger Rotarians want professional development. So this is just assisting in fulfilling that particular need in a formal way. It's already there in Rotary, being on a committee and being a president-elect and so on. So it's really to assist from that standpoint as well. And then the symbiotic relationship, because the structure is the same in relation to how Rotary operates and how Toastmasters operate. So the partnership was relatively seamless. So my understanding, there are about 2 courses already on the Learning Center. And I understand that a few clubs in North America, I'm not so sure if it's our zone, where members from Toastmasters started to visit Rotary clubs, and a few persons from Toastmasters have actually joined. So that's another thing, another benefit we're anticipating going forward.
Okay, thanks, Audley.
I think I've only known Nico a few years. I think he came out of the womb ready to be able to speak in public as a confident speaker. No question, he's very polished. But I can tell you that when I joined Rotary, or going back to when I was president in 2001, 2002, the first day I stood at the podium and I was holding my agenda, I realized I couldn't read it because my hands were shaking too much. And so, I have certainly experienced that personal development, and Toastmasters can accelerate that type of ability to speak in public. So I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful. Nico's going to chime in now.
No, if I may, I just want to commend you again for adapting and doing these virtually, because the 24-hour get-together, like physically, I couldn't be there that weekend when it was originally planned. So being adaptive and doing this allows us to still juggle our careers, our kids, our families, our community commitment. So thank you for adapting and doing it. And I'm all for, obviously we have to do it till the end of the year at the district and zone level, but I'm looking forward to doing more of these. So thanks again.
Thanks, Nico. Other comments and questions about what we are all confronting as Rotarians and Rotary leaders with COVID and post-COVID?
Patrick, can you throw up the very last slide that you had up as part of your wrap up, please?
Sure. Is that what you were looking for?
It most certainly is. Thank you. I know that I could have gotten to it because I'll look at this later, but thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure. You got it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We're at an hour. If you have any comments or questions, I still have a little bit of time. I'd be happy to take those.
Hey, Patrick, what were some of the best questions that you got on Tuesday? I was not able to attend that one, but you said you and Scott said that there were a lot more discussion.
Scott, you want to take that? You moderated that discussion.
Yeah, the takeaways from Tuesday were we talked a lot about, preparing clubs and getting them to go into, to continue their Rotary hours that a lot of clubs were doing. They talked about that a little bit, and the Discover Rotary program they were doing. And we talked a little bit about trying to get clubs, which is kind of similar to what we did today too, but getting clubs to be aware that they have a problem and, how to identify, get those clubs to accept that. And, one of the other takeaways we had, and we talked a little bit about it, is some of the clubs may have a disruption in their club, and there may be a need to lose a member to gain membership. So that was probably the key differences that I remember from our discussion Tuesday versus today. Anything else, Patrick, you think
I think that's right. I think there was perhaps more discussion about those who stand in the way of changes for the small clubs. I recall as a governor meeting with a club, they met Monday mornings at 6:45 a.m. No kidding, and they had no women. They had trouble attracting members. They weren't going to change anything, and it was because 2 charter members absolutely wouldn't allow any changes. And I finally said, so you 2 guys, you're the ones who are going to turn out the lights when this is done, right? And they looked at me like I was being disrespectful. They were gone before my end of the year as governor because they just absolutely wouldn't change and couldn't understand how unattractive they were in so many ways. So another club has risen and is 3 times their size in that area. It's not that hard to figure out. Well, thank you all for taking the last little bit over an hour with us. I do want to mention that next week we will not have our full group meetings on Tuesday and Thursday as we have these past 5 weeks. Most of you will be meeting with your assistant Rotary coordinator next week at a time that's specific to your group, to your territory, and I think those are all set up or getting set up. The following week, our 7th and final week, we'll meet just on Tuesday night at 5 p.m. That's June 2nd at 5 p.m. And I'll send out reminders about this on email. But that'll be our wrap up. We'll have a special speaker to cover a topic that we've not yet covered. We'll have some wrap up type of items and some time for discussion as well that week. So I've got one more thing, but I'll cover it with all of you by email. So thank you again for being with us for the last hour and for the last 5 weeks. Enjoy your time next week with your ARC, and I'll see you on June 2nd.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, guys.